Something impossible was hiding beneath the sand. In June 2024, a massive storm slammed into Usedom, a quiet island in the Baltic Sea. The winds were brutal. The waves crashed higher than anyone could remember. When the storm finally passed, it left behind more than just destruction. It exposed a secret that had been buried for almost 80 years. 3 days later, Henrik Peterson was walking his dog along the beach near Peenemünde. He noticed something strange sticking out from a collapsed sand cliff. At first, he thought it was just old bunker debris from the war. Lots of those scattered around the island, but when he got closer, his heart started racing. This was no ordinary piece of concrete. It was a doorway. An actual doorway leading straight into an underground passage. The next day, police showed up with archaeological experts. They went inside, and what they found 20 meters down made everyone freeze. A complete villa. Built entirely underground, hidden beneath the dunes. 6 rooms connected by a central corridor. Thick reinforced concrete walls. Ventilation systems that looked sophisticated even by today's standards. Electrical wiring still attached to corroded light fixtures. Everything was perfectly preserved, like a time capsule from another era. Then they found something that changed everything. In the largest room, forensic teams discovered a leather briefcase. Inside were identity documents belonging to Major Ernst Wegener of the Luftwaffe. But here is where things get weird. According to official records, Major Wegener died in an air raid on Berlin on February 3, 1945. He was supposed to be dead. Yet this underground villa was clearly built after his death. The evidence was right there in front of them. Cement bags with stamps showing March 1945 production dates. A wall calendar torn to show April 17, 1945. That is more than 2 months after Wegener supposedly died in that air raid. Nothing made sense. If Major Wegener died in February, who built this elaborate underground hideout in spring 1945? And why would his personal documents be sitting inside months after his official death? Something did not add up. If you want to discover who really built this secret villa and why Major Wegener's documents were found there months after he was declared dead, hit that like button right now. It helps us uncover more forgotten mysteries like this. And subscribe so you catch our next investigation into the buried secrets of World War II. Now let us get back to Usedom Island and the final desperate months before Nazi Germany collapsed. The Baltic coast was hiding more than just holiday memories that spring. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was finished. Everyone knew it, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. Soviet forces had already liberated Poland and were charging into eastern Germany. Allied armies were pushing hard from the west after breaking through on D-Day. The Luftwaffe, which once dominated the skies as Hitler's pride, was now a shadow of what it used to be. There was almost no fuel left to fly planes. Allied bombing had smashed production facilities into rubble. Experienced pilots were dying in huge numbers during desperate defensive missions. But some Luftwaffe facilities still mattered. The research and testing centers along Germany's Baltic coast were among the most important. Usedom Island sits where the Oder River flows into the Baltic Sea. The military had been using it since the 1930s when weapons testing facilities were first established. The biggest facility was Peenemünde. This is where Germany developed the V-2 rocket program under Werner von Braun by 1943. Peenemünde had become one of the most sensitive military sites in the entire Reich. It had massive anti-aircraft batteries and security everywhere. Allied intelligence knew how important it was. That is why they launched Operation Hydra in August 1943, a huge RAF bombing raid that killed hundreds of workers and temporarily shut everything down. Even after that attack, development work kept going through, 1944 and into 1945. Germany's position was hopeless. But the site's isolation and security made it perfect for sensitive activities beyond just rocket development. Major Ernst Wegener's career tells you everything about how the Luftwaffe changed during the war. Born in 1908 in Hamburg, his father was a shipping merchant. He studied aeronautical engineering at the Technical University in Berlin, then joined the brand new Luftwaffe in 1935. His engineering background meant he worked in aircraft maintenance and logistics instead of flying combat missions. During the early war years, Wegener served in various desk jobs and made major by 1943. Records show he transferred to Luftwaffe High Command as Technical Branch in Berlin in early 1944. There he worked on aircraft, production and resource allocation. His colleagues said he was methodical and quiet. They also said he became increasingly pessimistic about Germany winning as Allied bombs kept destroying factories. Officers like Wegener mattered not because they led troops into battle. They mattered because of what they knew: technical knowledge, manufacturing processes, research programs, details about weapon systems. This information would be extremely valuable to whoever controlled Germany after defeat. As losing became certain, some officers realized their expertise could be used as bargaining chips with the Allies, or it could help them get better treatment during occupation. This was especially true for people connected to advanced weapons programs. Both the Soviets and Western allies desperately wanted that technology. The environment of Usedom played a huge role in why the island mattered during the war and why it stayed hidden afterward. The island stretches about 42 kilometers along the Baltic coast. Sandy beaches everywhere, massive dune systems, dense pine forests. The northern section belonged to Germany. The southern portion was Polish territory. That division became even more important after 1945 when new borders got drawn. The dunes near Peenemünde rose as high as 15 meters in some places. Baltic storms constantly reshaped them. These natural features offered concealment that regular military bunkers could never provide. The sandy soil was terrible for normal construction, but you could dig it out and reinforce it with concrete. That created hidden spaces completely invisible from the surface or from planes flying overhead. The weeks before Wegener disappeared were total chaos in Berlin and across Germany's shrinking territory. The Soviet offensive launched on January 12, 1945, smashed through German defensive lines in Poland. Soviet forces pushed relentlessly toward Germany's eastern borders. Luftwaffe High Command in Berlin faced constant disruption from Soviet air raids and artillery. Personnel files and records were either evacuated, destroyed, or just abandoned as everything fell apart. In all this confusion, tracking individual officers became nearly impossible unless they held critical positions. Wegener was a mid-ranking logistics officer. Senior leadership had bigger problems than keeping track of him while managing total military defeat. On the morning of February 3, 1945, Allied bombers hit Berlin hard. It was part of the ongoing strategic bombing campaign. The attack hammered government and military districts, causing major casualties and destruction. Luftwaffe High Command offices in the Bendler Block complex took damage during this raid. The official casualty report filed on February 5th told a simple story. Major Ernst Wegener was dead, killed in the bombing raid 2 days earlier. The report said his body had been pulled from the rubble and identified through personal effects and papers found near the remains. It stated that his body was buried in a mass grave at Stahnsdorf Cemetery south of Berlin. This was standard procedure for air raid victims during that time. Individual burials were impossible with so many dead. His wife Greta got the notification on February 10th through military channels. It came with a standard condolence letter and information about survivor benefits. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed official. But here is the problem. Wegener was not in Berlin on February 3rd. The evidence found in that underground villa proved it beyond any doubt. He had left the capital at least a week before the raid. A travel authorization document discovered in the briefcase was dated January 26, 1945. It gave Wegener permission to inspect Luftwaffe facilities in northern Germany. This was routine for officers in his position. The document listed several locations, including Peenemünde. It showed an expected return date of February 15th. The authorization had authentic signatures and stamps. Wegener had obtained legitimate orders to leave Berlin before the fatal air raid happened. Did he know about the raid in advance? Or was it just lucky timing? Nobody knows for sure. But one thing is certain. His absence on February 3rd meant he could not have died in that attack. Someone declared him dead when he was very much alive. Building that underground villa took serious planning, resources, and time. Wegener had clearly prepared his refuge well before he officially died. Forensic experts analyzed the structure and found it was built in multiple phases. The initial excavation and concrete work showed signs of professional engineering, proper reinforcement techniques, quality waterproofing. This was not amateur work. The construction materials told their own story. Cement, steel reinforcement bars, wood framing, electrical components. All of these items were tightly controlled by military authorities in 1945. You could not just walk into a store and buy them. Wegener's position in logistics gave him access to such materials, or at least the authorization documents needed to get them. Investigators estimated the villa took at least 2 months of work to build. It possibly started as early as December 1944. Think about that timing. Wegener began building his escape while Berlin still functioned. The location choice was brilliant. The villa sat approximately 800 meters inland from the beach, hidden within a stable dune system. It was completely invisible from ground level. The entrance had been buried under additional sand and vegetation. Only someone who knew the exact location could find it. Ventilation shafts went up to the surface through hollow tree trunks that were planted to look natural. The structure was positioned high enough above the water table to prevent flooding, but it was deep enough to maintain stable temperatures and avoid detection from planes flying overhead. Wegener used his engineering background to design a hiding place that could stay undetected forever under normal conditions. Only that exceptional 2024 storm exposed what had been perfectly hidden for 79 years. Now let us talk about that casualty report from February 5th, the one that declared Wegener dead. It contained some very strange irregularities that nobody noticed at the time. The reporting officer was Oberst Lieutenant Hans Kretschmer. He had no direct connection to Wegener's section or duties whatsoever. Kretschmer worked in air defense operations, not logistics or administration. Why would he be filing paperwork for Wegener? The signature on the report matched authenticated examples of Kretschmer's handwriting. That part checked out, but nothing explained why he would file casualty documentation for an officer completely outside his chain of command. This happened during total chaos after the February 3rd raid. Luftwaffe high command facilities were damaged. Personnel were scattered everywhere. Administrative anomalies like this were actually common. Nobody questioned Kretschmer's report because doing so would have required functioning oversight systems. Those systems no longer existed in Berlin during those final apocalyptic months. Greta Wegener accepted her husband's death with the exhausted resignation that was common among German civilians by February 1945. She had already been through so much. Allied bombing destroyed their Hamburg home in 1943. She was evacuated and living with relatives in Bavaria. When notification of Ernst's death arrived, his personal effects were delivered to her in March 1945 through military postal services. A wristwatch, a wedding ring, a leather wallet. She had no reason to doubt the official account. She had no resources to investigate even if suspicions had crossed her mind. The mass grave burial meant there was no individual marker to visit. The chaotic conditions of Germany's collapse made detailed inquiries impossible. Greta focused on what mattered: survival, caring for their 2 young children in an increasingly desperate situation. Decades later, conflicting testimony started emerging when researchers examined Wegener's case. A former Luftwaffe clerk was interviewed in 1982 for an oral history project. He recalled processing casualty documentation in early February 1945. He remembered noticing that several reports appeared to have been filed by officers who normally would not handle such paperwork. He specifically remembered questioning a report for a logistics major because the signature came from an air defense officer. When he raised this concern, his supervisor dismissed it. The supervisor said administrative chaos made irregularities inevitable. Questioning every anomaly would paralyze the already overwhelmed system. The clerk's name was Otto Lehmann. He had not retained specific details about names or dates, but he confirmed the general pattern existed. Something strange was happening with those casualty reports. The theory that Wegener staged his own death did not come from one big revelation. It emerged gradually through research. In the 1990s, researchers examining Luftwaffe personnel records that survived in various archives noticed a disturbing pattern. Officers associated with sensitive technical programs were being declared killed in air raids. During early 1945, in several documented cases, these officers later showed up alive. They surfaced in Allied custody or in post-war civilian life. Their deaths had been falsified. The motivations for faking death varied widely. Some officers wanted to avoid war crimes prosecution. Others hoped to negotiate with occupying powers using their technical knowledge as leverage. Some simply wanted to disappear and start over with a clean slate. Wegener's case fit this pattern perfectly. But it lacked confirmation because nobody had found evidence of him surviving past February 1945. Until now, official Allied investigations into German military personnel had a narrow focus. They wanted to identify war criminals and secure technical experts for recruitment or prosecution. The Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, known as CIOS, was established by Allied authorities to locate German scientists and engineers. They compiled extensive lists of personnel associated with advanced weapons programs. Wegener's name actually appeared on a CIOS roster of Luftwaffe logistics officers connected to jet aircraft production. The list was compiled in March 1945. However, the entry noted him as Kier February 45 based on German casualty records. No further investigation occurred. Allied authorities were dealing with millions of German personnel. They prioritized high-value targets like rocket scientists and jet propulsion experts. They had no capacity to investigate every mid-ranking officer's death record for accuracy. Wegener slipped through the cracks. What happened after the war made discovering Wegener's villa almost impossible? Under the Potsdam Agreement, the Baltic coastline, including Usedom, became part of Soviet-occupied East Germany. The outcome was swift and total. Soviet teams systematically dismantled Peenemünde's rocket facilities. They shipped equipment and technical documentation to the USSR along with captured German scientists. The entire area became a restricted military zone throughout the Cold War, first under Soviet control, then later administered by East German authorities. Civilians were completely prohibited from entering. The entire northern section of the island served as a military training area for Warsaw Pact forces. These restrictions meant no casual exploration or development occurred anywhere. Near the dune systems where Wegener's villa lay buried, it was like putting a lock on history itself. Meanwhile, Greta Wegener tried to rebuild her life. She remarried in 1952 to a Bavarian schoolteacher. She lived quietly until her death in 1979. She never publicly questioned the circumstances of Ernst's death. But her daughter Christina later recalled something interesting. Her mother occasionally mentioned inconsistencies in the official account, dates that did not align properly, personal effects that seemed too intact for someone killed in a bombing, the curious lack of specific details about body identification, small things that nagged at her but never added up to certainty. Christina was born in 1941. She had no direct memories of her father. She grew up accepting his death as one of millions that marked that generation. She pursued a career in medicine, got married, and raised her own family in West Germany. She rarely discussed her father except in the context of general family history. The past stayed buried, just like that villa. Everything changed in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell, and German reunification gradually opened previously restricted areas to civilian access. Usedom Island began transforming into a tourist destination. The beaches and natural beauty attracted visitors. The northern section near Peenemünde remained largely undeveloped through the 1990s. Former military areas slowly got repurposed for museums and nature preserves. The Peenemünde Historical Technical Museum opened in 1991. It documented the site's rocket development history. Visitors came to learn about the V2 program. But here's what nobody paid attention to. The extensive dune systems between the former military facilities and the beach received almost no interest. Environmental protection regulations limited construction. The unstable sandy terrain discouraged development. The dunes remained largely as they had been in 1945, constantly shifting under wind and wave action, covering and revealing the landscape in unpredictable patterns. Wegener's secrets stayed hidden in plain sight. Technology advanced rapidly during the 2000s, ground-penetrating radar and archaeological survey. Methods enabled systematic examination of historical sites. But Usedom dunes presented unique challenges. The sandy, constantly shifting substrate produced confusing radar signatures. It was difficult to distinguish natural features from man-made structures. Several archaeological surveys of former military sites on the island occurred between 1995 and 2020. They focused on documented bunker locations and weapons testing areas. None of these surveys examined the specific dune system where Wegener's villa lay buried. Why would they? Nothing in historical records suggested any structures existed there. The villa remained undetected not because technology could not find it. It remained hidden because no one thought to look in that location. Then came the storm that changed everything. It struck Usedom in early June 2024. This was not a normal Baltic storm. Meteorological records classified it as severe coastal storm with sustained winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Waves reached 6 meters in height. The combination of high winds, elevated water levels, and the storm's duration created perfect conditions for massive erosion. The storm persisted for nearly 36 hours. Beach profiles changed dramatically. Some areas lost 3 to 4 meters of sand depth. Dune systems that had been stable for decades were carved away. The storm exposed layers that had been buried since the war years. Nature finally revealed what humans had missed. Henrik Peterson had lived on Usedom since relocating from Hamburg in 2018, a retired civil engineer. He regularly walked the beaches near Peenemünde with his border collie. On June 7, 2024, 3 days after the storm ended, he followed his usual route. The section of beach had been dramatically altered. A dune cliff that previously stood 8 meters high had partially collapsed. It created a rubble field of sand and vegetation everywhere. Peterson noticed concrete exposed while his dog investigated the debris. The gray concrete contrasted sharply with the surrounding tan sand. His professional background immediately told him something important. This was reinforced structural concrete, not the crude wartime bunker construction common in the area. Closer examination revealed something that made his pulse quicken. A doorway or entrance frame partially exposed by the dune's collapse. Peterson pulled out his phone and photographed the discovery. He contacted local police immediately. They arrived within the hour. The responding officers were uncertain what they were dealing with. Wartime ordnance? Historical artifacts? They cordoned off the area and notified the Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania Office for Cultural Heritage. Better safe than sorry? Dr. Thomas Eilhart arrived on June 8th, an archaeologist specializing in 20th century military sites. He came to conduct an initial assessment. His preliminary examination confirmed something significant. The structure was a deliberate construction, not a natural formation or simple bunker. It warranted comprehensive investigation. This was bigger than anyone initially thought. The excavation required careful planning. The structure's entrance was blocked by collapsed sand and debris. Systematic removal was necessary to avoid further structural damage. Dr. Heilhart's team began work on June 12th using hand tools to clear the entrance passage. Engineers assessed stability every step of the way. By June 15th, they had cleared enough debris to safely enter the structure. Battery-powered lights revealed the full extent of the underground villa. Everyone stood there in stunned silence. 6 rooms arranged along a central corridor. Each room measured approximately 3 meters by 4 meters. The concrete walls showed remarkable preservation with minimal cracking or water damage. The entire structure measured approximately 25 meters in length by 8 meters in width. It was buried 3 to 4 meters below the original dune surface, perfectly preserved. perfectly hidden. The room functions became apparent through systematic documentation. One served as living quarters containing a corroded metal bed frame and cabinet. Another appeared to be a kitchen with a small stove, storage shelves, and a hand-operated water pump connected to a below-ground cistern. A third room contained a desk, filing cabinets, and shelves for books and documents. The remaining rooms served for storage and technical equipment. A generator, batteries, fuel containers, various tools. The central corridor connected all spaces and provided access to two emergency exit shafts leading upward through the dune system. Everything about this place screamed one thing. This was designed as the leather had deteriorated at the stress points, but it was still functional. Dr. Heilhardt's team photographed it exactly where they found it before carefully transporting it to a mobile conservation laboratory set up in a nearby building. Conservators spent 2 days treating the briefcase with strict humidity control before opening it. On June 18th, what they found inside changed everything. Wegener's military paybook, several letters addressed to him, technical documents related to Luftwaffe aircraft production, and a personal journal covering January through April 1945. This was the smoking gun everyone needed. Dr. Heilhardt knew this discovery required specialized expertise. He assembled a team of experts to analyze the villa's contents and historical context. Dr. Sabine Werner, a forensic document analyst from the University of Greifswald, examined all paper materials. Dr. Klaus Hoffmann, a military historian from the German Armed Forces Military History Research Office, reviewed the case against Luftwaffe records in German military administration during 1945. Dr. Maria Schneider, a structural engineer with experience in archaeological conservation, analyzed the building's construction to determine its timeline and methodology. The investigation team established a research center at the Peenemünde Museum where materials could be examined under controlled conditions. Document authentication proceeded step by step. Wegener's paybook matched standard Luftwaffe forms from the 1944 to 45 period. Entries documented his service history from 1935 through January 1945. The handwriting and personal entries matched signatures unauthenticated. Wegener documents held in military archives. Paper composition and ink chemistry analyses confirmed materials dated from the correct period. Cellulose content, lignin degradation patterns, and chemical signatures all matched expected values for 1940s German military paper stock. The technical documents found in the briefcase bore authentic classification stamps and routing marks consistent with Luftwaffe High Command procedures. No evidence suggested forgery or alteration. Everything checked out perfectly, but the journal provided the real story. Wegener had maintained detailed entries from January 15th through April 22nd, 1945. The early January entries described growing anxiety about Berlin's vulnerability to bombing and the certainty of Germany's impending defeat. On January 18th, he wrote something chilling. The end approaches. Those with eyes to see recognize we have months at most. I must plan for survival beyond the collapse. The next entries documented his preparations. Securing materials for the villa's construction. Arranging legitimate travel authorization to Peenemünde. Establishing contacts with local contractors who could assist with building work in exchange for scarce supplies he could provide through his logistics position. The construction timeline emerged clearly from the journal entries. Wegener made his first visit to Usedom. On January 28, 1945, he was conducting an inspection tour authorized by his travel orders, while simultaneously surveying potential hiding places. He identified the dune location on January 30th and began excavation work on February 5th. That was 2 days after his supposed death. The journal entry from February 6th confirmed everything. The casualty report has been filed. Kai handled it as arranged. Payment delivered as promised. I am officially dead and work can proceed without interference. This proved that Wegener had bribed Oberst Lieutenant Kretschmer to file the false death report. The timing coincided perfectly with the February 3rd raid that provided cover for the deception. Construction proceeded rapidly through February and March. Wegener employed 3 local laborers. He paid them with food, fuel, and consumer goods. These items were currency far more valuable than Reichsmarks in collapsing Germany. He supervised work personally using his engineering knowledge to ensure proper construction techniques. The villa's electrical system was examined by Dr. Schneider's team. It showed professional installation with proper insulation and circuit protection. More evidence of Wegener's technical competence. By March 20th, according to journal entries, the structure was substantially complete. He began moving supplies inside. He noted something with quiet satisfaction. The refuge stands ready. Now I must wait for the Reich's death and pray the victors prove more reasonable than their propaganda suggests. The journal's final entries covered April 1945 and revealed Wegener's deteriorating mental state. He had isolated himself in the villa. He ventured out only at night to observe the surrounding area and listen to radio broadcasts. The Soviet advance into eastern Germany and the American-British drive from the west meant Usedom would soon become occupied territory. Wegener's April 15th entry expressed deep conflict. Do I remain hidden and hope to slip away when chaos permits, or do I approach the occupiers with my knowledge as bargaining chips? Technical information on jet production might secure favorable treatment, but it might also brand me a traitor to fellow officers still fighting. His April 20th entry mentioned hearing artillery fire in the distance. Soviet forces were approaching from the east. The final entry, April 22nd, was brief and tense. Tomorrow I depart. Better to take my chances with the occupation than to remain buried here indefinitely. The documents remain for now. Perhaps I will return. He never did. Physical evidence backed up the documentary timeline perfectly. Construction materials recovered from the villa included cement, bags with manufacturer stamps from January and February 1945, electrical. Components bore production dates from late 1944, food, supplies like tinned goods, dried rations, and preserved vegetables had Wehrmacht issue stamps dated through March 1945. A calendar on the office wall had been torn to April 17th. Consistent with Wegener's journal timeline. Most significantly, the villa showed clear signs of brief occupancy rather than long-term use. Dust accumulation patterns indicated the spaces had been sealed shortly after completion. Personal items were minimal. A few clothing articles. Basic toiletries. Some books. This suggested Wegener had never fully moved in or had removed most possessions before departing. Dr. Hoffman's archival research uncovered additional context. Wehrmacht logistics records from early 1945, fragmentary but still informative, documented systematic diversion of construction materials from official projects to unauthorized uses. Officers with access to supply systems exploited the collapsing administrative structure to accumulate resources for personal survival. Wegener was one of many who engaged in such activities. However, his underground villa represented an unusually elaborate preparation. More significantly, Dr. Hoffmann discovered Oberst Lieutenant Hans Kretschmer's denazification file. It revealed that Kretschmer had been briefly detained by American forces in July 1945 on suspicion of filing fraudulent casualty reports. However, he was released without charges. Investigators concluded the wartime chaos made administrative irregularities inevitable rather than criminal. Kretschmer died in 1953. He never publicly acknowledged his role in Wegener's false death. The investigation conclusively established that Ernst Wegener had systematically planned and executed his disappearance. He timed it to coincide with the February 3rd air raid that provided convenient cover for a false death report. His preparations began in January 1945, possibly even earlier. He recognized Germany's defeat was coming and calculated that his technical knowledge might prove valuable to Allied occupation authorities. The underground villa represented insurance, a hidden refuge where he could wait out the immediate chaos of Germany's collapse, store sensitive documents that might serve as bargaining tools. maintained the option to either surrender with valuable information or simply vanish into post-war anonymity. Wegener's decision to bribe Kretschmer for the false casualty report demonstrated calculated risk management. By officially dying on February 3rd, he eliminated administrative questions about his absence from duty while establishing a permanent false identity. The villa's construction timeline revealed impressive logistical execution under extraordinarily difficult conditions. Working in winter weather, using materials diverted from military supplies, employing laborers who had to be paid in goods rather than currency. Wegener completed a sophisticated underground structure in roughly 6 weeks. His engineering background proved essential. The villa's design incorporated proper drainage, ventilation, structural reinforcement, and concealment features that ensured its survival and invisibility for 79 years. Only exceptional coastal erosion exposed what would have remained perfectly hidden. This validated Wegener's site selection and construction methods completely. But here is the biggest mystery of all. What happened to Wegener after April 22, 1945? Dr. Heilhardt's team conducted extensive searches through multiple archives seeking any trace of him after that date. Soviet occupation records for Usedom, examined in Russian military archives, showed no mention of a Major Wegener being detained or processed. American and British prisoner records, which included German personnel who crossed from Soviet to Western zones, contained no matching entries. German civilian registration records from the post-war period, though incomplete due to massive population displacement, revealed no Ernst Wegener registering in any jurisdiction. He simply vanished. Several scenarios emerged as most plausible. First, Wegener might have died during the chaotic final weeks of the war, killed by military action, Soviet occupation forces, or simply succumbing to disease or starvation while attempting to reach Western zones. Millions of Germans died in such circumstances between April and August 1945. Many were buried in unmarked graves or never identified. Second, Wegener might have successfully assumed a false identity and lived out his life in anonymity, possibly in West Germany or abroad. This was surprisingly common among Germans seeking to escape their pasts, whether for criminal reasons or simply to start fresh. Third, Wegener might have approached Allied authorities using his technical knowledge as currency, secured favorable treatment, lived under protected circumstances that kept his identity classified. American and British intelligence agencies recruited numerous German technical experts and protected their identities from public disclosure. The investigation team uncovered one tantalizing lead. American intelligence documents declassified in 2019 included a brief reference to a German aviation logistics officer, providing detailed information about Luftwaffe jet aircraft production in May 1945. The OFFICER's name was redacted per standard classification procedures, but the description matched Wegener's background perfectly. The document noted this officer had provided information about material diversion and corruption in aircraft production. Precisely the kind of knowledge Wegener's position would have given him access to. However, the document provided no definitive identification. Subsequent intelligence files that might have clarified the individual's identity remained classified or had been destroyed per retention schedules. Dr. Hoffman concluded the evidence was suggestive, but insufficient to confirm Wegener's fate. The documents Wegener left in the villa revealed his intended strategy clearly. Among the technical papers were detailed reports on Luftwaffe jet aircraft production, including the Me-262 and He-162 programs. These reports documented systematic material diversion, corrupt practices by senior officers, false production figures reported to high command. Such information would have interested Allied intelligence services seeking to understand German aviation capabilities and to identify personnel for potential prosecution or recruitment. Wegener had clearly assembled these documents as leverage. He was betting that information would prove more valuable than loyalty to a collapsing regime. His decision to leave them in the villa when he departed suggested either he took copies or he abandoned, the plan to use them as bargaining tools, instead opting for simple disappearance. Ernst Wegener's story illuminates the complex moral landscape occupied by German military personnel who recognized their cause was lost but lacked clear ethical guidelines for how to act in that recognition. He was neither a resistance fighter opposing Nazi tyranny nor a fanatic determined to fight to the last. Instead, he was a pragmatist who used his technical knowledge and administrative access to plan for personal survival, willing to deceive both his superiors and his family to achieve that goal. The underground villa represents the extraordinary lengths some individuals went to in attempting to control their fates, amid total social collapse. The villa's 79-year concealment demonstrates how much of World War II's human story remains literally buried beneath modern Europe. Coastlines shift. Buildings are constructed over ruins. Landscapes transform while preserving fragments of the past in unexpected places. Wegener's refuge survived decades of storms, Cold War military activity, and post-reunification development simply because no one knew it existed. Its location remained stable until exceptional circumstances exposed it. How many similar time capsules remain hidden, waiting for chance discovery or forever remaining sealed beneath the landscape? The discovery also raises uncomfortable questions about the ease with which individuals could disappear in 1945's chaos and construct new identities in post-war society. Wegener, if he survived, might have lived decades as someone else. His wartime identity erased by a false casualty report. His actual fate unknown to family or authorities. This was not unique. Thousands of Germans successfully vanished and rebuilt lives. Some for criminal reasons, but many simply seeking escape from a past they wanted forgotten. The war's legacy included not just documented casualties and survivors. It also included a shadow population whose stories were deliberately erased and may never be recovered. Wegener's abandoned villa, with its carefully preserved documents and journal entries, stands as a monument to those unresolved fates. It represents the profound human instinct for survival that transcends ideology, duty, and even family bonds when existence itself hangs in the balance. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Some people are never meant to be found. Major Ernst Wegener might have died in those chaotic final weeks, or he might have lived a long, quiet life under another name. We will probably never know. But his underground refuge, hidden for nearly 80 years beneath the shifting sands of Usedom, tells us everything we need to know about the desperation, cunning, and will to survive that defined those final dark days of World War II.